It was late September when Mark Fletcher went out for a solo hike on Ridgeback Trail. He'd done it dozens of times, quiet, peaceful, no service, no distractions. Just the sound of his boots and the wind in the trees. Around the halfway point, as the sun dipped low and turned the leaves gold, he saw her. A girl, standing barefoot in the middle of the trail. She was maybe 12 or 13. Pale, thin, wearing a white cotton dress that hung past her knees. Her hair was tangled and matted like she hadn't brushed it in days. No shoes, no jacket, and no gear, just her, standing completely still, staring at him. Mark stopped. "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, eyes locked on his, head slightly tilted. Something about her expression was off, not scared, not lost. Just blank, like she wasn't all there. He took a few steps forward, slower now. "Do you need help? Are your parents nearby?" Nothing. Not a word. Not a blink. He looked down at his phone. No signal. Typical. When he looked up again, she was gone. There hadn't been time for her to run, and there was nowhere to hide. Dense forest on both sides, thick with dry brush and thorny undergrowth. He scanned the trail ahead, heart racing a little now. "Hello?" he called out. "Where'd you go?" No reply. Just trees. Just silence. Uneasy, he headed back. He didn't run, but he didn't dawdle either. By the time he reached the trailhead, dusk had settled in. His truck sat alone in the gravel lot, and on the hood, right above the grill, was a single barefoot print. Still wet, still muddy, pointing directly at the windshield. Mark didn't sleep well that night. The image of the girl, her stillness, her eyes, kept creeping into his thoughts. He tried to brush it off. It had been an isolated trail. He must have imagined something. Maybe a trick of the light. But the footprint on his truck? That didn't sit right. The next morning, he called the park ranger station. When he explained what happened, the woman on the other end of the line was quiet for a long moment.
"A girl, you said? On Ridgeback Trail?"
"Yeah, barefoot, wearing a white dress. I thought she might have gotten lost or something." The silence deepened.
"I'll send someone out to check. But listen, Mark, we've had some strange reports from that area before. Could be nothing. I don't want to alarm you, but it's better to be safe."
Alarmed? That was putting it mildly. He hung up uneasy, but figured it was best to wait. If it was just a lost kid, they'd find her. If not, well, he'd let them deal with it. The next day, Mark returned to the trailhead, hoping for an explanation. Maybe a hiker had seen her. Maybe she just wandered off. But when he asked the other hikers at the parking lot, no one had seen anything or anyone matching her description. Around noon, a park ranger pulled up. He was young, maybe in his 20s, with a serious expression and a rifle slung over his shoulder. Mark approached him. "You're here about the girl, right?" he asked. The ranger nodded. "Yeah, we're taking this seriously. We've got a search team coming in the morning." Mark tried to ask about the reports from the night before, but the ranger cut him off. "Let's just hope she's found before dark." He gave Mark a strange look, then drove off. Mark stood there for a moment, unsure. The whole situation felt wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on why. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for him on that trail. And it wasn't the girl. 2 days later, Mark couldn't shake the nagging feeling in his gut. The search had turned up nothing, no sign of the girl, no further reports. But the unease in him kept growing, pushing him to return to the trail despite the warnings. He parked at the trailhead, alone again, and took a deep breath. The air was thick with the scent of pine, the sound of distant birds overhead. He told himself to relax, he was just being paranoid. It was nothing. But as he walked, the quiet seemed heavier than before, as if the forest was holding its breath. About a mile in, he saw it. The same spot where he had encountered her. There, on the trail, was a pile of leaves, freshly disturbed. Not natural, arranged, almost deliberately. It wasn't wind. Someone or something had placed them there. Mark's pulse quickened. He approached cautiously, but then stopped. His heart skipped a beat when he saw something half buried beneath the leaves. A small white dress, ragged, torn at the hem. His throat tightened. Before he could bend down to look further, a rustling sound came from the bushes to his left. He spun around, but no one was there. Just trees. The noise stopped. And then, faintly, he heard it, a soft, quiet voice, almost drowned by the wind. "Help me." Mark's stomach twisted. The voice sounded wrong. Weak, distant, like it was coming from somewhere far deeper in the woods. "Hello?" he called out, but the voice was gone. A chill crept over him, making his skin crawl. Without thinking, he turned and began walking back, faster now. The sound of his own footsteps was the only thing he could hear. Then he saw it. At the edge of the path, a figure in the distance. Standing still, just like before. The girl. She was facing away from him, her long hair hanging loose. This time, she wasn't alone. Someone stood beside her, tall, thin, but no face. Only darkness where a face should be. Mark's blood ran cold. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. The image of the faceless figure beside the girl replayed in his mind over and over. Who was that? And why was it following her? His mind raced. He had to know more. He had to understand what was happening. The next morning, he went straight to the local library. He pored through old records, maps, and articles, hoping for a lead. It wasn't long before he stumbled across a faded article from the 1950s, buried in the back of a box labeled Local News. The headline was simple: "Missing girl found dead on Ridgeback Trail." Mark read through the article, his hands trembling slightly. It told the story of a young girl, no older than 12, who had disappeared while hiking with her family. They searched for days, but when her body was found, the cause of death was never clear. There were no signs of foul play, but the girl's body was found at the base of a cliff, far off the trail, as if she had walked there in a trance. But the article mentioned something that stood out to Mark, a detail that sent a shiver down his spine. Witnesses reported seeing a tall, shadowy figure near the girl before her disappearance. The room felt cold. He read the paragraph again. It couldn't be a coincidence. The description of the figure matched what Mark had seen on the trail, the same emptiness, the same sense of darkness. The article ended with a warning: the Ridgeback Trail remains a place of strange disappearances and eerie sightings. Travelers are advised to avoid the trail after dusk. Mark slammed the folder shut. He wasn't alone in this. The girl, the shadow, they weren't new. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled back to Ridgeback Trail. It was as if some force was calling to him, and the more he resisted, the stronger it became. He couldn't explain it, but he knew he had to go back. That evening, just as twilight settled over the woods, Mark returned to the trail. The same unease from the first time crept over him as he stepped onto the familiar path. The trees loomed tall and silent, their shadows growing longer by the minute. This time, he wasn't alone. The ranger from the other day, a young man named Ryan, was waiting for him at the trailhead. "Thought you might show up," Ryan said, voice low. "You're not the only one who's been feeling it." Mark frowned. "What do you mean?" "I've been out here a couple of times now," Ryan said. "Something's not right. I can feel it. That girl, she's still here, Mark. And whatever the thing is that's with her, it's not just in the woods. It's in our heads too." Mark's heart pounded. "I saw it, her and something else. A shadow. It followed me." Ryan nodded. "I know. It follows everyone who gets too close. The girl, the thing beside her, they're connected. But it's not the first time this has happened. I've talked to some old-timers. They say the girl's been seen by hikers for decades. Same dress, same look. But the shadow, that's something newer." Mark's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, newer?" Ryan hesitated. "There are rumors. People who've gone missing, people who've looked too closely into what's happened here. They say the shadow isn't just watching. It takes." A chill crawled up Mark's spine. "Takes what?" Ryan gave him a long, hard look, then said quietly, "It takes you." Mark didn't know whether to trust Ryan or not, but the fear in the ranger's eyes was real. They stood there for a moment, the air thick with tension. "I'm not leaving," Mark said. "I need to know what happened. What this thing is." If it's been going on for decades, someone has to stop it. Ryan shook his head. You don't understand. Whatever's here, whatever's been watching, that girl, it doesn't want to be stopped. It wants you to look, to get close. And when you do, it takes. Mark stood firm, a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest, but he wasn't backing down. I'm going in, whether you come with me or not. Ryan seemed to hesitate for a moment, then let out a long breath. Fine, but stay close. Stay alert. The two of them walked into the woods, the trail now bathed in an eerie twilight glow. The silence was oppressive, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the shadows growing longer around them until Mark saw it. The spot where the girl had first appeared. It was eerily quiet, almost too still, and Mark's stomach churned with dread. Do you feel that? Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible. Before Mark could answer, he saw her standing just ahead, barefoot, white dress swaying in the wind. Her eyes were fixed on them, unblinking. But this time she wasn't alone. The shadow was there again, this time closer. A tall, featureless figure, its form too dark to be human, looming beside her. It didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe. It was just there. Mark's pulse raced. He wanted to turn and run, but his feet wouldn't move. It was as though the air around him had thickened, weighing him down, trapping him. Ryan grabbed his arm, his grip tight. We need to go. Now. Mark tried to speak, to ask about the shadow, the girl, but his voice was lost in the oppressive silence. Everything felt wrong. He couldn't look away from the girl's cold, empty stare. Suddenly, the shadow moved. Not toward them, away, as if it was leaving, but it was too fast. Too quick. It vanished into the trees like smoke. Then the girl turned and walked into the woods, her bare feet gliding over the earth without a sound. Ryan pulled Mark back toward the trailhead, his breath coming in ragged gasps. We're not alone anymore. We have to get out. As they rushed back, Mark could feel the weight of something behind him, the feeling of eyes on his back. When they finally reached the parking lot, Ryan slammed the truck door shut behind them. Mark's heart was still pounding. He looked at Ryan, his voice shaking. What happens to the people who disappear? What happened to the others? Ryan stared at the dashboard, his face pale. They never leave the trail. They become part of it. Part of the shadow. Just like the girl. Mark felt a sudden, cold realization sink in. He had looked too closely. And whatever was out there wasn't done with him yet. Mark never returned to Ridgeback Trail after that night. He couldn't bring himself to, not after everything he'd seen. The girl. The shadow. Ryan's words echoed in his mind constantly, it takes you. But it wasn't over. It couldn't be. 3 weeks later, Mark's phone rang at 3:17 a.m. He didn't recognize the number, but something told him not to ignore it. He picked up the phone, but only silence greeted him on the other end. Static. Then, a voice, faint but clear, whispered through the noise. Help me. Mark's heart slammed in his chest. The voice sounded too familiar. Is it? He started, but the line went dead. He stared at the phone, numb. He didn't need to look outside to know something was watching him. He could feel it. The same oppressive presence, the same cold grip that had followed him that night in the woods. The next day, Mark packed a bag. He wasn't sure what drove him back, but he couldn't shake the pull. He had to finish what he started. By sunset, he was at the trailhead again, this time alone. He felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine as he stepped onto the path. The woods were silent, too silent, as if holding its breath, waiting. The trail was different this time. The air felt heavy, like a storm was about to break, but nothing moved. Mark walked the path with purpose, the memory of the girl and the shadow pushing him forward. He reached the spot where she had appeared, the same bare patch of earth where the leaves had been disturbed. The same eerie quiet. The same oppressive presence. And then, in the distance, he saw her again. The girl. She stood there, facing him, her dress swaying in the wind. But this time, there was no shadow. Mark approached slowly, his mind racing. What do you want from me? He called out, his voice shaking. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she turned and began walking into the woods, her bare feet leaving no trace on the ground. Mark followed, not sure why, only that he couldn't stop himself. The deeper he went, the more it felt like the forest was closing in on him. The trees seemed to loom higher, blocking out the light. He could hear nothing but his own footsteps and the faint sound of wind whispering through the leaves. Suddenly, he stopped. A cold wind blew through him, and he felt it, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. He turned around, heart racing, but the path was empty. Then, through the trees, a figure stepped out. Tall, thin, dark. No face, just blackness. Mark froze, his blood running cold. The shadow was back, and it was closer than ever.